It's no surprise to some of you who have known me for a little while that I love hip hop music. I do. I love hip hop music. Don't get me wrong. I love gospel music too. I really do. But I grew up in the era of hip hop. I grew up during the time of rappers like Jay-Z, Nas, Tupac, and the Notorious B.I.G. And the Notorious B.I.G. has always been a very interesting figure to me. Because anytime I listen to the Notorious B.I.G., some know him as Biggie Smalls, what I often hear in his music is a soul wrestling with his creator. When you listen to songs on his album, and in fact, you don't even have to go into the songs on his album. If you look at some of his album titles, you see that this is a man who is wrestling with his soul. He's wrestling with his creator. He had an album called Ready to Die. He had an album called Born Again. He had an album called Life After Death. This is someone who's grappling with the eternity of his soul. And I recall a line in a song called Juicy, where he says, born sinner, the opposite of a winner. Remember when I used to eat sardines for dinner? That concept of born sinner is actually what I want to deal with today. And it makes me wonder if maybe he spent a little time in church that he knows about this idea of inherited sin. That's what I want to discuss today. If you're taking notes, I want to talk about this thing called inherited sin. There's this idea that theologians and Bible scholars like to throw around, that we are born in sin. In fact, it's King David who writes in the Psalm, I was born in sin. I was shaped in iniquity. In my mother's womb was I shaped in iniquity. This idea that we're not born perfect, but that we're actually born with a condition of sin, a sin nature, is what some like to call it, inherited sin. We know what sin is, but today I want to talk about this thing called inherited sin. And I don't just want to talk about it. I want to share with you 3 steps to overcoming it. I like to be practical, so I want to give you 3 steps to overcoming inherited sin on today. Now, in order to do that, I think we first have to understand what is this thing that I'm talking about called inherited sin. Inherited sin, I went to Merriam-Webster because I love my definitions. And that word inherit is actually defined as to receive from an ancestor as a right or title descendable by law at the ancestor's death. That sounded good, but that wasn't quite the definition I was looking for, so I kept going. And the next definition was to receive as a device or legacy. And that sounded good as well, but wasn't quite hitting what I was going for. Then I got to the third definition, and I think I hit a home run. It says to receive from a parent or ancestor by genetic transmission. I'm going to say that again. To receive from a parent or ancestor by genetic transmission. Now, some of you who may have taken some science classes, some anatomy classes, you know of this thing that's in our body called DNA. DNA is interesting because DNA determines what you look like. The reason I have what we call the Goodman gap is because it is in my DNA. We Goodmans have this Goodman gap. It's hard-coded in my DNA to develop certain physical traits that communicate to other people what family I come from. There are distinct features that are hard-coded in DNA. The reason that my nose is the way it is, the reason that my eyes are brown, the reason that my hair is short and coily is because it's hard-coded in my DNA. I don't see how people don't believe in a God when such detail and attention to detail goes into the development and the creation of us that must have been a creator somewhere. God literally hard-coded our DNA to carry certain things and develop certain traits and features inside of us. And the thing about DNA is that it's not just limited to physical features, but scientists have discovered that DNA also has the ability to be hard-coded with characteristics. That DNA has the ability to be hard-coded with certain traits and activities and behaviors. And so it's not that I just look like my parents because of my DNA, but I do certain things like my parents because of my DNA. I have an outlook that's a certain way because of the DNA. I walk a certain way. I talk a certain way. I suffer with certain things. I'm more inclined to certain things because it's hard-coded in my DNA. In other words, it's inherited. It's inherited. And as we look at the text, I want to look at verses 1 and 2. We see a hard coding of a sin in the DNA of a brother by the name Cain. Verse 1 says, Adam made love to his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, I have gotten the man that the Lord promised. And then she gave birth to another child, Abel, Cain's brother. Abel was a shepherd, and Cain was a farmer. What's interesting here is that we read in creation that man is made in the image and likeness of God. Man is initially created perfect. That man is not flawed. That literally it's like God looking in a mirror and seeing himself. We are the image and likeness of God. The problem is in chapter 3, man falls and skews the image. Here's where we get in trouble. In the whole chapter 3, in the whole account of the fall of man, one thing you notice is that Adam never repents. Adam never repents. God approaches Adam and says, did you eat of the tree? Adam shifts blame to his wife, and God begins handing out the punishments of the sin. The wages of sin is death. He begins giving punishment. He tells the snake what's going to happen to him as a result of the sin. He tells Eve what's going to happen to her as a result of the sin. He tells Adam what's going to happen to him as a result of the sin. Adam never repents, but God covers him. I need you to let that sink in. God kills an animal, or kills potentially two animals. He covers their sin, but they never repent of their sin. And it's out of that place that that Adam makes love to his wife Eve, and they reproduce. The problem here is they're not reproducing the image of God at this point. They're reproducing a skewed image. This is why I believe in Genesis chapter 5, if I'm not mistaken, as it's given the genealogy, what it says is that Adam's son were made in his image and his likeness. It's the skewed image and skewed likeness that Adam is made in. And so two flawed people get together and create a flawed copy. This is why it's important that you know who you're having children with. Because it's not just all the good of you that's going into making that baby, but all of your struggles, all of your shortcomings, all of your bad habits are coming together and being reproduced. And this is why when it comes time to having babies, you better make sure that you're getting the best version of that person. And that they're getting the best version of you. Adam and Eve seek God for a child. Because as you see in the text, she says, he's given me the son that I promised. They seek God for a child. The problem is they ask God for a blessing, but they're not in the right position for it. They say, God, we want to reproduce ourselves, but the problem is we aren't our best selves. I'm scared of God giving me everything I ask for because I know my heart ain't always right when I'm asking him for certain things. And so they're asking God for a son. But the problem is they have not repented of what they've done. And so they're asking God to bless them even though they're in this weird position with God. And God gives it to them. They have a son named Cain. Now, what's interesting here, I'm doing a little legwork before I get into my points. What's interesting here is they get Cain. And the Bible lets us know that Cain is a tiller of the ground. Again, Adam is his father. Adam was a tiller of the ground. And so the son he produces is a tiller of the ground. He, like father, like son. He's made in the image and likeness of his father. And so he now has certain issues that his father has. God gives them the son that they deserve. But the Bible says they have another son named Abel. What's interesting about this, and I never realized it until I started preparing the sermon, it says that Abel is a shepherd. Let that sink in. Their first son is a tiller of the ground. That's the only occupation during that time. God tells Adam, you're going to be a tiller of the ground. That's the only job to give. But yet they have this other son, and this son named Abel is a shepherd. This blessed me because God gives them a son in the image and likeness of Adam, but then he gives them another son in the image and likeness of God. He's the good shepherd. So they get a son that they deserve, but then they also get a son they don't deserve. And that blesses me that I serve a God who, even when I asked for certain things that I'm really not in a position for, that even when God gives me what I deserve, that even when God gives me what I asked for, after I suffer through what I asked for, he'll still give me what he desired. And this is the testimony of Adam and Eve. They get the son they deserve, but then God still blesses them with the son they don't deserve. Now, the problem is they have a bad sower and a good shepherd. They're blessed with a bad sower and a good shepherd. Now, the problem is the bad sower has the damaged seed. And so now even though he looks like his father, walks like his father, talks like his father, he also has issues like his father. How do we overcome these issues? First point I want to give you today is that in order to overcome inherited sin, this sin that is passed down from generation to generation, we must be aware of it. I'm going to give you 3 A's today. In order to overcome inherited sin, the first thing you have to do is be aware of it. Verse 3 says, later Cain brought some crops from the land as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought some choice parts of the firstborn animals from his flock. The Lord approved of Abel and his offering, but he didn't approve of Cain and his offering. And so Cain became very angry and was disappointed. If we're going to overcome inherited sin, the first thing we have to do is we have to be aware of it. Now, some of you are saying, Pastor Mike, what do you mean I have to be aware of it? If you've ever been to the doctor, there's a question that doctors like to ask. When you sit down in front of that doctor, he begins going down a list of things, and I've never seen a doctor miss this question. He gets to a question that goes something like this. Does your family have a history of? Does your family have a history of diabetes? Does your family have a history of cancer? Does your family have a history of hypertension? What does your family have a history of? Because doctors understand that if we don't deal with your history, we can't properly understand your present. If we don't deal with your past, we might mess around and cause you to lose your future. And so they start with this question: does your family have a history of? Now, we like to say it this way: does such and such run in your family? Does sugar run in your family? Does high blood pressure run in your family? This brings me to my next thought. Just as it's important to know what sicknesses run in our families, it's important to know what sins run in our family. I'm going to say that again. Just as important as it is to know what sicknesses run in our family, it's important to know what sins run in your family. Does lying run in your family? Does alcoholism run in your family? Does perversion run in your family? These are conversations we don't have, but it's been proven that couples who go into relationships asking the tough questions, asking the relevant questions like, what does your family have a history of? They tend to do better. Why? Because they're aware of the problems before the problems come up. Just as it's important to know what sicknesses run in your family, I need to know what sins run in your family. I think it's interesting that physicians ask that question, but pastors don't ask that question. That as we sit and counsel people, that maybe one of the first questions we should start asking is, what sins run in your family? Because maybe I can understand your behavior if I could understand your family. Maybe what you don't have language for, I can give language to, because I can now see what runs in your family. We see there's a particular sin that is running in Cain's family. Now, here's the thing. You don't see this sin unless you're looking for it. The sin is very discreet. In fact, if you read too fast, you're going to miss it. Let's go back to chapter 3. In chapter 3, the Bible lets us know that the serpent comes. We know that the serpent is Satan disguised, and he convinces Eve to partake in the fruit from the forbidden tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And Eve, of course, tempts her husband in, says, hey, take some of this. The snake said it was good for us, and Adam eats of that tree. And the Bible says that after Adam eats of the tree, that both of their eyes were open, because Adam was the covering, and so it didn't really hit her the way it hit her until it hit him. And so their eyes are open, and now they're seeing things that they shouldn't be seeing. They're viewing things in a way they shouldn't be viewing it. Man has now fallen. Man has now fallen. There's a sin that has entered in, and one sin always leads to another sin. See, this first sin, they ate of the tree. They disregarded what God told them to do. Then Adam moves into another sin. God asked Adam, Adam, where are you? And Adam says, I hid myself because I was scared. I was naked and I was afraid. And God says, who told you you were naked? Did you eat of the tree that I told you not to eat of? Watch Adam's response. That woman you gave me. That woman you gave me. That woman, you look at Adam's response. That woman you gave me. Adam shifts the blame from himself to God and his wife. So instead of repenting, Adam says, listen, how can I find a way to get this up off of me? Because I don't want to deal with my shortcoming. This is another sin of Adam. And his son finds himself in a similar situation. God comes up to Cain and he's like, Cain, listen, I don't respect your offering because I told you to give me offerings a certain way. And your brother gave the offering the way I told him, but you didn't give it the way I told him. And the Bible says that Cain's response is twofold. That Cain is angry and Cain is disappointed. Cain is angry. And he's not sorrowful. He's not sorry. Cain is angry and he's disappointed. Now, why is Cain angry and disappointed? Cain is angry because he sees his brother excelling. And watch this. He's disappointed because God did not lower his standard. I need you to let that set in. Cain is angry because his brother gets blessed. And he's disappointed because God didn't lower his standard. So Cain is shifting blame from himself to who? His God and his brother. Instead of finding a way to make it right, Cain finds a way to make it someone else's fault. And this is a sin that he inherits. I don't know if Adam taught him how to do it. I don't believe it. The Bible doesn't tell me. But like most inherited sin, I believe that Cain either saw his daddy doing it or Cain inherited it genetically. Cain suffers from an inherited sin. And he suffers from this inherited sin because he wasn't aware of it. I used to work for Canon in their laser copier and printer division. And I got a phone call from a client one time, and she said, this copy machine is messing up my copies. And I said, well, ma'am, what do you mean that the copy machine is messing up your copies? She said, well, when I copy this thing, I see this line there that I didn't see before. And I said, well, where is the line? And she said, the line is where I whited out a mistake I made. I said, wait a minute. You used whiteout to cover a mistake, and you made a copy of the original And the reproduction came out with a line where the mistake is. She said, yeah. I said, wait a minute. Did you use the liquid whiteout or did you use like the plasticky whiteout? And she said, I used like the whiteout strip, the plasticky one. I said, well, ma'am, I think I found your problem. See, in order to make your copy, the photocopier has to shine a very bright light on your original. And what's happening is the mistake you covered, that even though you can't see it on the surface, the light is so bright that it's exposing the mistake. It's exposing the shortcoming. It's exposing the sin. Listen, I can't see it if I'm looking at it, but if it's in the light is exposing it because the light is reflecting off of the mistake. That, ma'am, even though you tried to cover it, covering it wasn't enough. You need to deal with it. And watch this. My job would be easier if you had just made me aware of it from the beginning. She tries to cover the mistake. And what's funny is it's covered just enough that we don't see it with the naked eye. But if it gets in the presence of light, if it gets in the presence of God, what's done in the dark is revealed. It gets exposed. And this brings me to my next thought. Before Christ, some of us were carrying demons that the previous generation covered up instead of casting out. I'm going to say that again. Before Christ, some of us were carrying demons that the previous generation covered up instead of casting out. There are so many families that are messed up because of deathbed confessionals. That grandmama did something that she covered up, and because grandmama did something she covered up and she didn't make the family aware of it, the children started having urges that they couldn't explain. They started having thoughts that they couldn't explain. They started being tempted by things they couldn't explain. And that's because mama covered it up, but mama never cast it out. And so since mama reproduced herself with this covered up thing and didn't make anybody aware of it, now the children are carrying demons that were simply covered but never cast out, because you can't cast out a demon that you're not aware of. Cain has a demon. He has a struggle. He has a shortcoming that he's not even aware of. That's subconsciously in him, that he has no language for, that he can't explain. He just has this desire to shift blame when he finds himself in a tough situation. He does not own that thing, but he puts it off on somebody else, and he doesn't know where it comes from. And many of us are just like Cain. We have habits that have been formed. We have urges that we can't explain. We do things, and even though we don't want to do it, we find ourselves doing it. And it's because there's something in our life, there's something in our DNA that we are not even aware of. And in order to overcome inherited sin, I must first be aware of it. Now, how do I become aware of it? James 5:16 says something very interesting. Most of us know the latter part of it, but the first part of it says, confess your faults one to another and pray one for another, that he may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. I want to focus in on that first part. Confess your faults one to another. Here's our problem. We don't mind confessing our faults to God, but we won't confess our faults to one another. And I'm one of them people that just believe that God doesn't put stuff in the Bible for no reason. That he says confess your faults, not just to me. Yeah, if you confess them to me, I'm just and faithful to forgive them and cleanse you of all unrighteousness. But there's a second part to this. Don't just confess it to me, but confess your faults one to another. And I'm just crazy enough to believe that that one to another includes children, that one to another includes spouses, that one to another includes uncles and cousins, that includes everybody. And he says confess, which brings me to my next thought. Some of the issues we bring to faith revivals wouldn't be issues if we attended more family reunions. Some of the issues we bring to faith revivals wouldn't be issues if we just went to more family reunions. That if we were to know our families well enough, not just the good things, not just the accolades, not just the accomplishments, but I want to know what our families struggled with. Listen, it's great that we come from a generation of doctors, but it does me no good if I come from a generation of doctors that were drunkards. Yeah, I'm a public success, but I'm a private failure. And I don't know why. I'm thinking that there's just something wrong with me, but the whole time, this is something that's been going through my whole family. What do we struggle with? It's not enough to know our sicknesses, but what are our family sins? It hurt my heart speaking to a young lady that I had found out 3 or 4 generations of the grandfathers would molest the grandchildren. That's bananas to me. That every generation just perpetrated what the previous generation did. And I'm crazy enough to believe that it's because conversations were had amongst the affected, but no conversations were had with the next generation. And so the next generation came up with something in their DNA, a perversion in their DNA that they had no language for. But if someone had just sat them down and said, I had an unnatural affection with a family member, and you might have these urges too, but we're going to get together as a family and we're going to pray these things up off of it, because it's going to stop with this generation right here. Why? Because we're aware of it. Yes, Lord. And we're not just aware of it, we're willing to talk about it. We're willing to talk about it. If we knew the issues in our families, the reason I don't drink right now is because I know that we have a long history of drinking issues in my family. And here's the thing, the devil would tempt you to be like, well, you can just take a taste. The devil is a lie, and we've been struggling with this since slavery. A taste might bring me in. Clearly, my family is bound to this thing, that we're slaves to this thing, and so I'm not going to put myself in temptation to become the next slave. Yeah. Why? Because I'm aware of it. I'm aware of it. And it's easier to overcome what I'm aware of. If we're going to overcome inherited sin, we have to be aware of it. Not only that, but if we're going to overcome inherited sin, we must not give access to it. We must not give access to it. We must be aware of it. But point number 2, we must not give access to it. What do I mean? Verse 6 says, then the Lord asked Cain, why are you angry? And why do you look disappointed? If you do well, won't you be accepted? But if you don't do well, sin is lying outside your door, ready to attack. What's interesting about doors is, depending on what atmosphere you're in, a door has many names. One of the names of a door is access point. Again, depending on what circle you're in, depending on what atmosphere you're in, what you call a door, someone else will call an access point. Wow, what does that mean? An access point is simply a place where something or someone can gain entry. And so, in order to overcome inherited sin, we have to take heed to a warning that God gives to Cain. God tells Cain, and I love how he paints a picture for him. God says, listen, if you do what I tell you to do, if you follow my commands, if you aim for the mark that I'm giving you, then you'll do well. You'll do well. But if you don't, if you don't listen to me, if you don't take heed to my warning, if you don't follow my laws, he says, sin is lying outside of your door and is waiting to attack you. No, excuse me. Let me not misquote. Not waiting to attack, ready to attack. If you don't do well, sin is lying outside your door, ready to attack. And so God tells Cain, listen, you're on a dangerous slope, and the Bible lets us know warning comes before destruction. He says, Cain, things ain't looking good for you, brother. I need you to understand that if you do well, you're going to be all right. I will accept you. You're going to be good. I'll celebrate you the same way I celebrated your brother. But you're on a slippery slope. And if you keep up what you're doing, you're going to give access to something you can't handle. You're going to give an access point to something you're not going to be able to get back out of the door. And so he says, I need you not to give access to it. Now, how do we give access to it? How do we give access to inherited sin? I've watched a lot of crime dramas. One of my favorites is Chicago PD. And every time some of the CSI, the crime scene investigators, show up on a scene, one of the first questions they'll ask without fail, if it involves a home, one of the first things they'll ask is, are there signs of forced entry? First question they'll ask, were there signs of forced entry? What they're asking is, did someone break in or was someone allowed in? Because depending on whether there were signs of forced entry or not, lets them know who the perpetrator is. Because if they had to force themselves in, that lets them know that it was someone the person probably does not know. It was probably someone that they did not want in their house. But if there are no signs of forced entry, then what that tells the crime scene investigator is that the person was let in. That it was probably somebody they know, that it was probably someone they trusted, that it was probably someone they wanted to have in the house. Why is this important? Well, the reason we allow inherited sin access in is because oftentimes it's familiar. There's a familiarity with inherited sin. Even if I don't acknowledge it, even if it's subconscious, even if I'm not fully aware of it, that there's something familiar about inherited sin. And so oftentimes what happens is sin does not break the door down. We open up the door to sin. The question I want to ask you on today is, did you let in your perpetrator? Did you let something in that you could not handle? And did you let it in because it was familiar? Some of us let certain things in because we saw mama let it in. Some of us let certain things in because we saw daddy do it. Some of us let certain things in because uncle told us it was okay. Some of us allow certain things in because it was the example we had. And in some cases, some of us let certain things in because we got an appetite for it in our DNA. That because it runs in the family and no one in the family addressed it or repented for it, it has now fallen on me. And watch this, I now desire what's on the other side of the door, even though what's on the other side of the door desires to destroy me. One of the things my mom used to tell me, and y'all can't arrest her now because I'm grown, but when I was growing up, she would leave me home by myself because she was a single mom, had to work, and she would say, my mom looking like, Lord, he done told my business. My mom used to always stress to me before she left the house, don't open the door for nobody. And she would further explain what she meant by nobody. Even if it's somebody you know. If I don't call you and tell you they're coming, don't open the door for nobody. If you know who it is, don't open it. If you think you know who it is, don't open it. If you don't receive word from me that I sent them, don't open it. And again, the problem with us is because we are familiar with the thing, because we've seen that before in our past, because it's the example that we had, because we think we can handle what's on the other side of the door, we give access to it, we open up our own failure. But this is a result of us not being aware. And when you're not aware, you'll give access to things you can't handle. Now the question becomes, how do we stop access to it? We love to quote this scripture, but I don't think most of us know where this scripture comes from. Isaiah 22:22. Probably don't sound familiar to nobody, but we say it all the time. I will place the key of the house of David around his neck. Isaiah is prophesying about Jesus. What he opens, no one will shut, and what he shuts, no one will open. Isaiah is prophesying about the Savior, and God reveals to Isaiah that there's a key that he's going to place on Jesus' neck, And he says, listen, whatever doors he opens, no one can shut. And whatever doors he shuts, no one will open. Again, my question is, how do we stop access to inherited sin? How do we stop this familiarity and this urging to open a door that even though we know what's on the other side, we can't handle, but we still just have this urge to, how do we do it? And the answer is actually quite simple. God has to close that door.
Yes, Lord.
Growing up, and most kids can relate to this, we played outside. And many of us would play outside all day. All day long, we would play outside. And I remember my Aunt Zette, God rest her heart, my Aunt Zette would tell us, don't run in and out of her house. That either you're going to be outside or you're going to be inside, but you ain't going to keep running in and out of the door. And there came a point in the day where even though we might come in for a bathroom break or we might come in to get something to drink, times where we were opening and closing the door, there came a time of day where when Aunt Zette closed the door or Uncle Bill closed the door, that we don't open that door. That when an adult came and closed the door, we don't open that door anymore. Why? Because now someone with authority has closed that door. Or we would start up the next day. We know that when they opened the door, that at that point we had the ability to go outside. What am I saying? If we're going to not allow access to inherited sin, our prayer has to be, God, I need you to close this door. Why? Because if you close this door, I know I can't open it. If you close this door, I know they can't open it. If you close that door, my baby mama, baby daddy can't open it. If you close that door, the pastor can't open it. If you close that door, I can't open it. God, I need you to close the door. God, I need you to close every door that has allowed things into my family that has plagued us for generations.
Yes, Lord.
The only thing separating some of us from freedom is that no one in our family would close the door. And the reason my Aunt Zette would tell us not to run in and out of her house, because there are these pesky things called flies. That if you just crack a door, a fly will get in. It's like they sit and they watch for you to open the door so they can get. It sounds a lot like this sin that God is talking about. Flies are ready to get in your house. And they don't need it to be wide open. They just need a crack. And so what she was saying is, listen, don't keep running in and out of my house, because when you run in and out of my house, you allow things in my house that don't belong. And that's what God is trying to tell some of us. Listen, I need you to let me close that door, because every so often you get a temptation to open that door, and even though you don't open it all the way, you open it up just enough to bring that appetite back. You open it just enough to bring back those memories. You open it just enough to take you back to that place. I'm to a point where I don't need closure no more. Not from you. Only closure I need is from God. Because here's the problem. If I come to you looking for closure, you might be on the other side of that door waiting to attack. You may look familiar. You may look nice. You may look attractive. You may look like you have my best interest. But I have to remember why I closed the door in the first place. That if I close that door, I don't need to, I closed it for a reason. And so I don't need to go back to get closure. No, I need to go back with God to close it indefinitely. God, I need you to close this door because I'm weak. And this is what the Bible lets us know. Take heed lest ye fall. When we think we're strong, that's when we're weak. When we think we can handle what's on the other side of the door, that's when what's on the other side of the door gets us. And so God, I need you to close this door. Why? Because if you don't close it with me, it might open for my child. If you don't close it for me, the next 3-4 generations may never get from what's on the other side of this door. We must not give access to it. Point number 3, we're going home. We must take authority over it. We must take authority over it. The text says it wants to control you, but you must master it. Again, he tells Cain, listen, don't open that door, because what's on the other side of the door wants to control you. But if you're going to survive what's on the other side of the door, you need to control it. Now, I'm one of the ones who, again, I don't believe that God tells us something just to be telling us. That if he tells me I can control it, then I must possess the ability to control it. But it's not in my strength. He says, Cain, listen, it wants to control you, but you must master it. What do I mean? How many of you are familiar with this show called The Dog Whisperer? There was this guy they called the Dog Whisperer. I believe it was a Hispanic gentleman, and he would go to the most unruliest dogs. I mean, it's funny. It seemed like always the littlest dogs were the worst ones. Like, rarely did you see him dealing with big dogs. It was these chihuahuas and these small, crazy dogs that were terrorizing people. And he said something interesting one time. He was dealing with one of his clients, and she was asking, how do I get control over my dog? And he said, listen, if you want to control this dog, you have to show him that you are a confident pack leader. Because dogs respect pack leaders. And even though you only see your dog as a pet, your pet does not see you as a human. Your pet sees you as a pack leader. Your pet sees you as the lead dog. And here's the problem, and this is the quote that I want to stick with you. He said, humans are the only creatures that follow unstable leaders. Whoa. Dogs don't follow unstable dog pack leaders. Lions don't follow unstable lion pride leaders. Humans are the only creatures that follow unstable. I'll never forget it. He said, we're the only ones that follow unstable leaders. And so he said, if you're going to take control over your dog, then you have to show your dog that you are a stable pack leader, that you are a confident, strong pack leader, which brings me to my next thought. Demons are like untrained dogs. They don't respect what they know they can run over. Demons are like untrained dogs. They do not respect what they know they can run over. The reason we are struggling in inherited sin is because we are not confident in who we are. In some cases, we are so broken in our identity, so broken in our emotions, so broken that we cannot be confident and stand up to the generational demons that are facing us. And in many cases, the reason we have found ourselves unstable and broken and not confident is because of what was done to us by the previous generation, or what was not addressed by the previous generation. He says you have to control it. You have to take authority over it. And that starts with having an awareness of it. And it starts by not giving access to it. That if you can become aware, the Art of War says it like this: you have to know your enemy. And when you're aware of your enemy, you don't give access to your enemy. And when you don't give access to your enemy, you can take authority over your enemy. Demons are like untrained dogs. They don't respect what they know they can run over. I'm reminded of the brother who tried to cast the demons. Tried to cast the demons out. And the Bible lets us know that the demons beat the brothers out of their clothes and sent them out of the house. Why? They don't respect what they know they can run over. The reason that some of us are declaring and decreeing some things and nothing's happening is because demons don't respect what they know they can run over. Some of us sound real nice and cute in our prayers, and we're casting this and casting that, and nothing's happening, and the demons are showing up next week because they don't respect what they know they can run over. Why don't we take authority over it? If the Bible says we have authority, and God tells Cain, you don't have to go this route, that you don't have to be overcome. I know you were born with this thing. You were born this way, but you don't have to die this way. The reason, why don't we, even though the Bible tells us, why don't we take authority? I'm reminded of the analogy of an elephant. That if you take a baby elephant and you chain it to a tree, the baby elephant will try to pull away, and it won't move. And as it grows, it'll continue trying to pull away, and it won't move. And as it grows, it'll continue trying to pull away, and the tree won't move. And finally, it'll get to a point where no matter how big it gets, it'll always believe that the tree is stronger than him. Why? Because all its life it's tried to pull away from this thing and tried to pull away from this thing, and it couldn't. And even though it finally got to a place where it had the strength to pull this tree up out of the ground, because it failed so many times, because it accepted the fact that this tree is just stronger than it remains bound to something that it's stronger than. And some of our families are the same way. We've accepted things in our families that we're stronger than, that we've gotten enough word in us to overcome, that we've gotten enough prayer to overcome, that we've been to enough revivals to overcome, and we don't, because we've accepted it as who we are. Which brings me to my next thought. You cannot take authority over lies you've accepted as truth. You cannot take authority over lies you've accepted as truth. One of the things that breaks my heart to no end is when someone is struggling in a sin and they justify it by saying, this is just who I am. You've accepted a lie as your truth. And that's what the Bible calls a stronghold. We like to put the action as the stronghold, but no, a stronghold is just a fortified lie. It's a lie that has been fortified in our mind as a truth. And this is what we do when we say, well, this is just what my family does. That this is just who I am. That this is what we've always done. That my grandmama did this and my mama did this, and so I got to do this. My granddaddy did it, so my daddy did it, and so I did. We accept a lie as truth, and I cannot take authority over a lie I've accepted as my truth. And so we become like elephants, chained to things we have authority over, but not exercising our authority because we've accepted a lie as our truth. But how do we take authority over it? And I'm closing. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 4 through 5 says, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations, and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought, every thought to the obedience of Christ. Paul tells us that what messed Cain up was he accepted something about himself that really he wasn't even fully aware of, but probably saw his dad and said, well, since my dad struggles with this, I got to struggle with this. And if Cain had just cast down that imagination, that if Cain had just taken captive the thought, instead of allowing the thought to take him captive, then Cain would have been all right. Muhammad Ali has been quoted as saying, the fight is won or lost far away from witnesses, behind the lines, in the gym, and out there on the road, long before I dance under those lights. What Muhammad Ali was saying is that I don't win my fights in the ring, I win my fights in my mind. The reason Muhammad Ali was so effective is because most of his fighting was done before he threw a punch. Most of his fighting was him boosting himself up, saying, I'm the greatest, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, ain't nobody bad as me. It was spent hyping himself up, but not only that, it was spent tearing his opponent down. It was spent with him joking and poking at his opponent. Literally, before he got in the ring, he was already in the ring. And this was the advantage that he had over his opponents, that while they were in the gym punching bags, he was sitting and calculating how he was going to beat them. That while they was pumping iron and lifting weights, he was calculating how he was going to beat them. He won it in his mind before he ever got into the ring. Which brings me to my last thought. You cannot entertain sinful thoughts and expect to eradicate sinful behavior. You cannot entertain sinful thoughts and expect to eradicate sinful behavior. This is what God is trying to get Cain to understand. Cain, I need you to change your mind. I know you were born this way, but you don't have to stay this way. And this is why, don't get me wrong, most pastors don't accept that idea that you were born this way. Hey, I'll give you the pass. Maybe you were. But the Bible lets me know if any man be in Christ, he's a new creation. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things have become new. So even if you were born that way, even if it was in your DNA, even if it was the only example you had, it may have been, but you don't have to stay that way. Why? Because you don't have to accept that lie as your truth. You have authority, and God would not tell us we have authority over it if we did not, if he did not give it to us. You cannot entertain sinful thoughts. This is why Jesus says, listen, if you lust after a woman in your mind, you've already sinned with her. Why? Because if you've entertained it, you can't eradicate it. That the only thing stopping you is, watch this, an open door. If I'm lusting after you in my mind, the only thing stopping me is an open door. And the moment the door opens, this is why he said you've already sinned. Because once the door opens, and the enemy will ensure that the door opens, you're going to do it. If you imagining cussing somebody out, the only thing stopping you is an open door. And the devil going to send somebody to cut you off in traffic. He going to send a coworker to make you mad, steal your lunch, do something. Because the only thing stopping you now, because you're entertaining the thought, is an open door. He says, take authority over it. How do I take authority over it? I have to stop entertaining the thoughts. I have to cast down the imagination. I have to stop replaying certain things in my mind. Some of us are like a Blockbuster videotape. If you remember, they used to have a little sticker on them that said, please be kind and rewind. We're like a Blockbuster videotape. We keep getting stuck in sin because we're so kind and rewinding. We keep replaying thoughts. We keep replaying offenses. We keep replaying what they did to us, what they said about us, and we keep replaying that thing. And the more we replay that thing, the enemy is calculating a way to get us to open that door, because he knows as soon as we open that door, it's going to ruin our Christian witness. We have to take authority over it. And taking authority over it begins in the mind. Why? Because the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. I'm not going to win it with my hands. I'm not going to win it with my feet. I can't outrun it. I can't outpunch it. I can't outlift it. I have to win it in my mind. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And if I've accepted that I'm just going to cuss and smoke and drink and sex for the rest of my life, then that's what I'll become. And Cain accepted a fate that he did not have to. I'm going to give you one more A. We must receive grace from the Almighty. If we're going to overcome inherited sin, we must accept grace, must receive grace from the Almighty. I like how Cain's story ends to a degree. Verse 8 says, Cain talked to his brother Abel. Later, when they were in the fields, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. The Lord asked Cain, where is your brother Abel? I don't know, he answered. Am I supposed to take care of my brother? Am I my brother's keeper? Verse 10, the Lord asked, what have you done? Your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. So now you are cursed from the ground. He sinned. The wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. He's giving out the punishment for his sins. So now you are cursed from the ground, which has received the blood of your brother whom you killed. When you farm the ground, it will no longer yield its best for you. And this is the danger of sin, that as we sin, we literally begin to cut our productivity. As we sin, atmospheres don't have to change for us anymore. As we continue in sin, demons don't have to tremble from us. When we keep falling in sin, resisting the devil does not make him flee. Why? Because now we're cursed. We're walking under something that we should not be in, because we're not walking in the grace that God has given us. When you farm the ground, it will no longer yield its best for you. You will be a fugitive, a wanderer on the earth. But Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is more than I can stand. I like what happens here, but I dislike what happens here, because what we see here is that Cain's mind still ain't changed. Cain's mind still has not changed. God is dealing out punishment. He's saying, listen, this is the wage of your sin. And Cain's response is, not I'm sorry, not God forgive me, not God spare me. His response is, my punishment is more than I can stand. Cain is still self-preserving at this point. His mind still is not at repentance. He's still acting like his daddy. I often joke that the Bible would be this thin if Adam had just repented after he ate from the tree, but because he didn't, God spent 66 books trying to get us back to a place where we'll just say, God, I'm sorry. My punishment is more than I can stand. You have forced me off this land today. I have to hide from you and become a fugitive, a wanderer on the earth. Now anyone who finds me will kill me. But God. So the Lord said to him, not so. Not so. I hear everything you just said, but that's not what this is about to be. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over. And here's the part I want us to receive. The Lord gave Cain a sign so that anyone meeting him would not kill him. Let that sink in. Cain has sinned, and that one sin led to another sin that then affected somebody else. And what's so amazing about this, just being a Bible scholar and really looking at the Bible holistically, if you think about what's happening here, the bad sower killed the good shepherd. The bad son killed the good son. The son in the image and likeness of man kills the son in the image and likeness of God. This is almost a foreshadowing of our Savior. That even in Genesis, we're getting a glimpse of the redemptive work that's going to happen. Abel does nothing to deserve this death. And really, one can argue that Abel dies for the sin of Cain. Cain has sinned. And that one small sin leads to a bigger sin. God catches him. Cain continues to sin. God gives him punishment. Cain still won't repent. And God says, I'll give you a sign. Cain says, this punishment is more than I can stand. And God says, my grace is sufficient. While we were yet his enemies, Cain is still not willing to submit and be a son. He's still willing to be a servant to his sin. And God says, I'll still extend my grace to you. We should be running around this church, tearing these chairs up right now. Because so many times in our lives, we have been Cain. So many times in our lives, we've prayed, God, if you get me out of this, I'll never do it again. And we didn't mean it. We were just preserving ourselves like Cain was trying to preserve himself here. And God looked at us, shook his head, and said, that's cool because my grace is sufficient. That I know you still don't mean what you say, but my grace is sufficient. He said, he literally tells him, if anyone touches you, they're going to be punished 7 times over. And I'm so glad that God had such grace over my life that every weapon that formed against me that should have killed me, because God knew that a day like this was coming where I would have to proclaim his good news, that he said, listen, you can come near them, but you can't touch them because I've put a sign on them. And some of you are only where you are today because God put a sign of his grace on you. That the bullet jammed because a sign of grace was on you. That person didn't get you in that back alley because a sign of grace was on you. That you did not die in the midst of that thing because a sign of grace was on you. And I don't know who I'm talking to today, but this is your moment. That God is trying to let you know right now that my sign of grace is on you. But as the Apostle Paul said, shall we sin that grace may abound? God forbid. And God is saying in this moment that, listen, I knew you didn't mean it when you said it. I knew the last time you came to church that you were still going to do it. I know when you started looking through the Bible for answers that you still was going to go do what you wanted to do. But my sign of grace is on you. Another verse of scripture we see, though, in Genesis. You go a couple chapters over. God says, my spirit will not strive with man always. And at that point, he begins to cut the lifespan of man. I warned somebody today. His sign of grace is on you, but his spirit will not strive with you always. We do not continue in sin that his grace may abound. We don't get to a place where we stop aiming just because we don't believe he'll stop forgiving. Because there will come a time, if we're not careful, where, as the Apostle Paul says, we'll get turned over into a reprobate mind. That will be turned loose to the enemy to do what he will with us, in hopes that we'll come running back to God. If that's you today, if you're saying, Pastor Mike, I've got some inherited sin in my life. There are some things that I do, and as you were preaching, I recognize that I do because it's all I know. It's all I've ever seen. From generation to generation, it's just what we did. And I'm willing to do something different today. Then today can be your day. That your story does not have to end like Cain, but it can continue as his should have.